The transport ship's engine screamed as it descended through the crimson atmosphere of Nexira Prime. Inside the cramped holding cell, Roy pressed his face against the small viewport. Watching the alien world grow larger beneath them, the red soil stretched endlessly, broken only by massive crystalline structures that gleamed like jewels in the light of twin suns. Roy flexed his hands, feeling the weight of the energy shackles around his wrists. At 28, he had been a construction worker on the outer colonies before the Nexori Empire swept through human space like a plague. Now he was cargo, destined for their gladiatorial games. His broad shoulders and muscled frame had caught the attention of their slave traders. They saw profit in his physique. The ship touched down with a violent shudder, and Roy heard the hiss of hydraulics as the loading bay opened. Harsh voices barked orders in the guttural Nexari language, punctuated by the crack of energy whips. Roy had learned enough of their tongue during the 3-week journey to understand the basics. Fresh meat for the arena? One guard growled to another as they dragged Roy from the cell. This one looked strong enough to last more than one fight. Gladiatorial compounds sprawled before them like a small city. Training yards buzzed with activity as alien warriors practiced with various weapons. Roy noticed other humans among the fighters, their eyes hollow with defeat or burning with desperate fury. He wondered which group he would join Princess in. The tower high above the compound, Princess Alex stood on her private balcony, observing the new arrivals through crystalline lenses that magnified distant objects. Her lilac skin shimmered in the afternoon light, and her silver hair cascaded down her back like liquid mercury. Forearms moved with elegant grace as she adjusted the viewing device, a trait that marked her as pure Nexari nobility. Alex had grown. Bored with the usual entertainments of court life, the gladiatorial games provided her only real excitement, though lately even they had become predictable. Humans rarely lasted more than a few minutes against proper Nexari warriors or their trained beasts. They were simply too weak, too slow. Too primitive. Her upper left hand traced the golden jewelry that adorned her neck, while her lower arms held the viewing device steady. The new human looked different from the others. Where most arrived broken and terrified, this one walked with purpose despite his chains. His dark hair was untamed, and even from this distance, she could see the defiant set of his jaw. Another pathetic specimen, she murmured to herself, though something in her tone suggested she was not entirely convinced. Her emerald eyes followed Roy as the guards led him toward the gladiator barracks, the Beastmasters. Domain Commander Crest ruled the gladiatorial compound with an iron fist wrapped in ceremonial gauntlets. His scarred hide told the story of countless battles. His reputation for cruelty was matched only by his skill at training fighters. He stood 7 feet tall, his reptilian features twisted into a permanent sneer. "We'll fight tomorrow," Crest informed Roy as they processed him into the system. "Princess Alex has requested special entertainment for her birthday celebration. You will face Vorthok." The other gladiators in the intake area fell silent at the mention of that name. Roy noticed the fear in their eyes, both human and alien. Alike, Jorik, a grizzled human veteran with scars covering his arms, stepped forward. "Commander, sir," Jorik said carefully. "Perhaps the new blood should face something smaller first." "Vorthok has killed 12 fighters this season," Grest's laugh was like grinding stone. "The princess specifically requested our most challenging beast for her entertainment. Who am I to deny royal wishes?" Roy studied the faces around him. These were hardened fighters, survivors who had clawed their way through dozens of battles. If they feared this Vorthok, it must be truly formidable. But Roy felt no fear. It's only a cold certainty that he would do whatever it took to survive. The night before battle, the gladiator barracks buzzed with quiet conversation as fighters prepared for sleep. Roy lay on his narrow cot, staring at the ceiling while Jorik shared what he knew about tomorrow's opponent. "Vorthok is no ordinary war beast," the older man whispered. "Stands 12 feet at the shoulder, weighs as much as a ground transport, and has claws that can slice through battle armor like paper. Its hide is thick as starship plating, and it moves faster than anything that size has a right to." Roy absorbed this information without emotion. Throughout his life, people had underestimated him because of his calm demeanor. They saw a quiet construction worker and missed the strength that years of heavy labor had built into his frame. They did not know about the nights he spent in underground fighting rings, earning extra credits to send home to his family. "Has anyone ever killed one of these beasts?" Roy asked. Jorik shook his head. "Not with bare hands. A few fighters have. Managed it with weapons, but tomorrow you go in with nothing but your wits and whatever strength you can muster." Roy nodded and closed his eyes. In his mind, he visualized the coming battle, running through scenarios and possibilities. Somewhere in the palace above, he knew the princess was probably planning her entertainment for tomorrow. He wondered if she would be disappointed when he survived. The arena Awakens dawn broke over Nazira Prime with spectacular beauty as the twin suns painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. The great arena began filling with spectators eager for blood and spectacle. Vendors hawked exotic foods and betting pools opened on how long the new human would last against Vort. In her private chamber, Alex prepared for the day's entertainment with more care than usual. She selected a gown of midnight blue that complemented her lilac skin, and her forearms moved in practiced coordination as she arranged her silver hair. Her personal servants bustled around her, but she barely noticed their presence. Something about the new human had captured her imagination. Perhaps it was the way he had walked into the compound with his head held high, or the defiant look in his eyes that she had glimpsed through her viewing device. She found herself hoping he would provide better entertainment than the usual quick. Roy stood in the preparation chamber beneath the arena, listening to the crowd's roar above. Guards had stripped him to simple leather pants and boots, leaving his muscled torso bare. He stretched methodically, preparing his body for the ordeal ahead. The door mechanism rumbled, and blinding light poured in as the arena floor was revealed. Roy stepped forward into the circular battleground, his eyes adjusting to the harsh illumination. The sand beneath his feet was stained dark with the blood of countless previous combats. The royal box Princess Alex settled into her ornate viewing throne position to give her the perfect view of the arena below. Her emerald eyes immediately found Roy as he emerged from the fighter's entrance. Even from this distance, she could appreciate the impressive physique that marked him as different from the usual human fodder. Her father, Per Valdris, had not attended this minor entertainment, leaving Alex to enjoy the spectacle with only her personal guard and servants in attendance. She preferred it this way, as it allowed her to react naturally, without worrying about imperial protocols. "Bring forth Vorthok," she commanded, her voice carrying clearly through the arena's acoustic design. The crowd's excitement reached fever pitch. As the beast gates began their slow opening sequence, even Alex felt her pulse quicken with anticipation. She had seen Vorthok fight many times, but the creature never failed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. The beast emerges. The ground trembled as Vorthok stepped into the arena light. The warbeast was even more magnificent and terrifying than Jorik's description had conveyed. Its muscled form moved with predatory grace, despite its massive size. 6 legs ended in claws longer than sword blades, and its armored hide gleamed like polished obsidian, multiple eyes fixed on Roy with alien intelligence. This was no mindless animal, but a bred warrior, trained from birth to kill efficiently and brutally. Its roar shook dust from the arena walls and sent lesser spectators cowering in their seats. Roy stood perfectly still in the center of the arena, studying his opponent with the same calm focus he had once brought to reading construction blueprints. The beast was indeed formidable, but every creature had weaknesses. The key was surviving long enough to find them. Vorthok began its charge, massive claws churning the sand as it built momentum. The beast moved with shocking speed for something so large, closing the distance between them in heartbeats.
Roy waited
Until the last possible moment before diving to his right, feeling the wind from Vorthok's passage ruffle his hair. The impossible moment the crowd gasped, as Roy not only avoided the beast's initial charge, but somehow managed to grab hold of Vorthok's massive neck as it thundered past. His powerful hands found purchase despite the creature's armored hide, and In one fluid motion that defied everything the spectators thought they knew about human limitations, Roy twisted with explosive force. The sound of Vorthex's neck snapping echoed through the suddenly silent arena like a gunshot. The massive beast, which had killed dozens of fighters and terrorized the gladiatorial games for 3 seasons, collapsed to the sand with an earth-shaking thud. Roy stood over the fallen creature, breathing heavily but otherwise unharmed. His dark eyes swept the stunned crowd before finding Princess Alex in her royal box. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, their gazes locked across the arena. Alex felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. This human had just accomplished something that should have been impossible. The casual display of strength challenged everything she had been taught about the supposed superiority of her species. More disturbing was the way her heart raced when those defiant brown eyes met hers. The crowd slowly found its voice again, erupting into confused cheers and bewildered shouts. Betting pools scrambled to process outcomes that no one had predicted. But Alex heard none of it. She was lost in the gaze of a human slave who had just changed her world forever. Roy raised his hand in what might have been a salute or a challenge. The gesture directed solely at her. Despite everything she had been taught about maintaining royal dignity, Alex found herself leaning forward in her throne, her composed facade cracking like ice under summer heat. As the guards finally moved to escort Roy from the arena, his eyes never wavered from hers. And for the first time in her privileged life, Princess Alex of the Nexari Empire felt the solid ground of her beliefs shifting beneath her feet. Now the human Roy had done more than kill a beast. It awakened something dangerous and utterly forbidden. In the heart of an alien princess, the aftermath of victory, the gladiator barracks buzzed with hushed conversations as Roy returned from his impossible victory. Fellow fighters looked at him with a mixture of awe and wariness, as if he had transformed from man to myth before their eyes. Jorik helped him clean the beast's blood from his hands, shaking his grizzled head in disbelief. In 30 years of fighting, I've never seen anything like that, the veteran gladiator whispered. You snapped Vorthex's neck like it was a twig. How is that even possible? Roy remained silent as he washed the sand and sweat from his body. He had always been stronger than normal humans, but even he was surprised by what had happened in the arena. Perhaps it was the surge of adrenaline, or maybe desperation had unlocked something deep within him. Either way, he was alive. And that was what mattered. Commander Crest appeared at the barracks entrance. His reptilian features twisted into something that might have been confusion or grudging respect. You? He growled, pointing at Roy. Princess wishes to see you. The other gladiators fell silent. Private audiences with royalty were unheard of for common fighters. Roy pulled on a clean tunic and followed Crest through corridors he had never seen before, each step taking him deeper into the heart of Nexari power. The secret garden Princess Alex waited in her private garden, a hidden oasis within the palace walls, where exotic plants from across the empire bloomed in carefully tended beds. The space was designed for solitude, surrounded by high walls that blocked the view from other parts of the palace. Here, she could escape the constant scrutiny of court life. She had changed from her formal gown into simpler robes that allowed her 4 arms to move freely. Her silver hair was bound in a practical braid, and she paced among the flowering vines. With nervous energy, the memory of Roy's gaze haunted her thoughts. Stirring feelings she had never experienced before, when the garden door opened and Roy stepped through, accompanied by a nervous guard, Alex felt her breath catch. Up close, he was even more impressive than she had imagined. His presence filled the space with quiet confidence, and his dark eyes studied her with the same intensity she remembered from the arena. Leave us, she commanded the guard, who hesitated before bowing and withdrawing. For a long moment they stood in silence, separated by 20 feet of garden path and a lifetime of social conditioning. Roy was the first to speak. Your Highness, he said simply, offering a slight bow that managed to be respectful without being subservient. You killed Vorthok, Alex said, her voice barely above a whisper. They told me it was impossible for a human to possess such strength. Roy moved closer, his steps careful but unafraid. Perhaps they told you wrong about many things. Breaking down barriers, The conversation that followed shattered every preconception Alex had held about humans and their capabilities. Roy spoke, with intelligence and depth that contradicted everything. She had been taught about his species being primitive and simple-minded. He described his life before capture, the family he had left behind, and the dreams he still carried despite his current circumstances. On my world, we built cities that reached toward the stars, Roy said, settling onto a stone bench beside a fountain. We created art that captured the beauty of 1,000 sunsets, and we loved with hearts that knew no boundaries of species or origin. Alex found herself drawn to sit beside him, her forearms folded carefully in her lap. Our scholars teach that humans are incapable of true civilization, that you are driven only by base instincts and violence. And what do you believe now? Roy asked, his eyes meeting hers directly. The question hung in the perfumed air between them. Alex realized that everything she thought she knew was crumbling under the weight of direct experience. This human showed none of the characteristics her education had promised. Instead, she found herself face to face with someone whose depth of character challenged her most fundamental beliefs. I believe, she said slowly, that I have been lied to my entire life. The first touches the afternoon wore on, their conversation deepened into more personal territory. Alex spoke of her isolation within the palace, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who saw only her title rather than her true self. Roy listened with genuine attention, offering insights that revealed his understanding of power and its burdens. Leadership is supposed to serve others, he said, watching her face carefully. But from what you describe, your position seems designed to serve everyone except you. The observation struck Alex like a physical blow. No one had ever dared to suggest that her royal privileges came with a cost too high to bear. The realization that this human understood her better after one conversation than her own people did after a lifetime brought tears to her emerald eyes. Without thinking, she reached out with one of her upper hands to touch his arm. The contact sent electricity through both of them, a connection that transcended species and social barriers. Roy's skin was warm beneath her fingers, and she could feel the steady rhythm of his pulse. I should not be here, she whispered, even as she made no move to pull away. Neither should I, Roy replied, covering her hand with his own. But sometimes the things we should not do are the only things worth doing. Discovery and danger there. Forbidden meeting was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Commander Crest's voice carried through the garden walls as he spoke with palace guards, searching for the missing princess. Alex quickly withdrew her hand, but the warmth of Roy's touch lingered on her skin like a brand. I must go, she said urgently, rising from the bench. If they find us together like this, Roy stood as well, his presence both comforting and dangerous in the fading afternoon light. When will I see you again? The question revealed the depth of longing that had grown between them in just a few hours. Alex knew that any future meeting would be impossibly risky, yet she found herself already planning ways to make it happen. Tomorrow night, she said impulsively, the East training yard will be empty after the evening meal. But Roy, if we are discovered, I understand the risks, he said quietly. The question is whether you do. Before she could lose her courage, Alex rose onto her toes and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that sealed their dangerous pact. The contact was brief but electric, a promise of connection that would sustain them through the dark hours ahead. Surveillance and suspicion. Commander Crest watched from the shadows as Princess Alex emerged from her private garden, her composure carefully maintained but her flushed skin betraying signs of emotional turmoil. He had served the royal family for 20 years and knew the princess well enough to recognize when something had changed. The timing of her private meeting with the human gladiator was suspicious, especially given her unprecedented request to see the fighter immediately after his victory. Cress's loyalty to the Empire ran deeper than his fondness for any individual, even royalty. If the princess was developing inappropriate attachments, it was his duty to investigate. He made careful note of her behavior over the following day, watching for any signs that would confirm his suspicions. The princess attended her normal court functions, but her attention seemed divided. More tellingly, she made several inquiries about the training schedules and guard rotations for the Gladiator compound. The secret meeting the next evening found Roy waiting in the shadows of the East training yard as the last light faded from Nexora Prime's twin suns. The empty space felt vast and exposed, but he knew that Alex had chosen it carefully. Her knowledge of the palace's routines and guard patterns had made this clandestine meeting possible. When she appeared like a ghost in the darkness, Roy felt his heart race with more than just relief. She had abandoned her formal court attire for practical, dark clothing that allowed her to move unseen through the palace corridors. Her silver hair was hidden beneath a hood, but her emerald eyes gleamed in the starlight. "You came," she whispered, moving into his arms with an urgency that spoke of hours spent fighting her own doubts. "I promised I would," Roy replied, holding her close and marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. Despite their different physiology, they found shelter in an abandoned equipment shed, where whispered conversations revealed the depth of longing that had grown between them. Away from the constraints of their respective positions, they were simply two beings drawn together by forces stronger than social convention. Love. Transcendent in the privacy of their hidden refuge, Roy and Alex explored the growing connection between them with tender caution. Her forearms allowed her to hold him in ways that felt both alien and absolutely natural. While his strength provided a sense of security she had never known in her protected but isolated royal life, they shared stories of their childhood dreams, their fears for the future, and the growing certainty that what existed between them was worth any risk. Roy spoke of the construction projects he had loved, the satisfaction of building something lasting and beautiful. Alex described her secret studies of other cultures, her fascination with the diversity of life throughout the Empire. "I used to dream of seeing other worlds," she confessed, tracing patterns on his chest with gentle fingers. "Not as a conqueror or ruler, but as someone free to explore and learn." "Come with me," Roy said suddenly, the words escaping before he could consider their implications. "When I find a way to escape this place, come with me." The offer hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Alex knew that accepting would mean abandoning everything she had ever known, trading a life of privilege for uncertainty and danger. Yet the alternative, remaining in her golden cage while Roy faced death in the arena, seemed far worse. "Us," she whispered, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of rebellion and hope. The Watcher's Report Commander Crest observed the emotional reunion between Princess and Gladiator through night vision equipment. His worst suspicions confirmed. The implications were staggering. Not only was the princess engaging in forbidden contact with a human slave, but their obvious affection threatened the very foundations of Nexari society. He documented everything carefully, knowing that Emperor Valdris would demand complete details when presented with this intelligence. The ruler's reaction to his daughter's transgression would likely be swift and brutal. Humans who corrupted royal bloodlines faced immediate execution, while the princess herself would face consequences that Crest preferred not to contemplate. As he watched Roy and Alex part with obvious reluctance, exchanging promises to meet again, Crest made his decision. Tomorrow, he would present his evidence to the Emperor. The stability of the Empire was more important than any individual, even a princess who had forgotten her duty to her people. The forbidden love that had bloomed in secret was about to face its greatest test. Human, or the princess, truly understood the forces that would soon be arrayed against them. The Emperor's. Emperor Valdris stood in his private throne room, chamber carved from a single massive crystal that amplified his voice and presence to godlike proportions. His 8-foot frame radiated barely contained fury as he studied the surveillance recordings Commander Crest had provided. The evidence of his daughter's betrayal played across holographic displays in sickening detail. "How long has this been going on?" Valdris demanded, his voice like grinding stone. 3 weeks since the initial arena encounter, Your Majesty," Crest replied, standing at rigid attention. "The meetings have become increasingly frequent and intimate. I believe the princess is planning to help the human escape." Valdris crushed the data crystal in his massive fist, the fragments cutting his scaled palm without drawing blood. The idea that his own daughter, heir to the greatest empire in the galaxy, would debase herself with a human slave, was beyond comprehension. Worse still was the threat such a relationship posed to the genetic purity that formed the foundation of Nexari supremacy. "Summon Princess Alex immediately," the Emperor commanded, "and prepare the human for public execution. This corruption ends today." A Princess Confrontettalix entered her father's presence chamber with her head held high, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. She had known this moment would come eventually. The palace had too many eyes, too many ears, for her secret to remain hidden forever. Still, she was not prepared for the cold fury in her father's ancient eyes. "Daughter," Valdris said, his voice deceptively calm, "I am told you have been entertaining inappropriate company." The holographic displays flickered to life around them, showing clear images of her meetings with Roy. Alex watched herself kissing the human gladiator, saw the tenderness in their stolen moments together, and felt no shame. Instead, she felt a fierce pride in the connection they had forged despite impossible odds. "I have been talking with Roy," she said simply, refusing to use the demeaning term slave her father preferred. "Talking," Valdris repeated, his tone suggesting the word tasted foul. "Is that what you call this debasement? This contamination of our bloodline?" Alex's forearms trembled with suppressed emotion, but her voice remained steady. "I call it love, father. Something you clearly no longer recognize." The Emperor's roar of rage shook dust from the crystal walls. His massive hand struck Alex across, the face with enough force to send her staggering, her silver hair whipping around her shoulders. Blood trickled from her split lip, but she straightened and met his gaze without flinching. "You will watch him die," Valdris snarled. "You will stand in the royal box while your human pet is executed before the entire empire. Perhaps seeing his broken body will cure you of this madness." The gladiator's resolve Roy knelt in his cell, hands bound with energy shackles that burned his wrists whenever he moved. The guards had been less than gentle during his arrest, but physical pain was nothing compared to his concern for Alex. He could only imagine what she was facing in the palace above, what punishment her father was devising for her transgression. Jorik sat in the adjoining cell, having been arrested for conspiracy after trying to help. Roy, the older gladiator's weathered face was grim as he studied their situation. "They're going to make an example of you," Jorik said quietly. "Public execution in the Grand Arena, broadcast across the Empire. They want to show what happens when humans forget their place." Roy tested the strength of his bonds, feeling the energy field that contained him. The shackles were designed to hold beings far stronger than normal humans. But he was beginning to understand that normal was not a word that applied to him anymore. The strength that had allowed him to kill Vorthok was growing, as if his emotional connection to Alex had awakened something dormant in his genetic code. "How many other humans are held in this compound?" Roy asked. Jorik's eyes widened as he caught the implication. "Maybe 200, scattered across different sections." "But Roy, even if you could break free, where would you go?" "This entire world belongs to the Empire." Roy closed his eyes and reached out with senses he was only beginning to understand. Somehow he could feel the presence of other humans throughout the facility, their despair and anger creating a network of shared emotion. More importantly, he could sense their readiness to fight if given the chance. Sometimes, Roy said quietly, the only way out is through the underground network unbeknownst to their Nexari captors. The human slaves had developed an extensive communication network over the years. Xena, a former military engineer who had been captured during the siege of Terra Colony 7, had spent 3 years building covert channels throughout the Gladiator compound. Hidden transmitters allowed messages to pass between different sections, while sympathetic alien guards provided intelligence about security rotations. News of Roy's impending execution spread through the network like wildfire. More importantly, word of his impossible strength and his connection to Princess Alex gave the slaves something they had almost forgotten: hope. Here was proof that humans could be more than their captors believed, that love could bridge the gap between species. Xena called an emergency meeting in the maintenance tunnels beneath the arena. Representatives from each human barracks gathered in the flickering light of improvised torches, their faces bearing the scars of years in captivity, but their eyes bright with possibility. "The princess risks everything for one of our own," Xena addressed the group. Tomorrow, they execute Roy to break her spirit and show the Empire that humans know their place. I say we show them something different. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled fighters. They had been slaves for so long that the idea of rebellion seemed almost impossible. Yet Roy's example had rekindled something that the Nexari thought they had crushed forever. "What are you proposing?" asked Thane, a massive former dock worker, whose arms bore the brands of multiple owners. Xena's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'm proposing we remind the galaxy that humans don't break easily." The royal box, the grand arena, filled to capacity as citizens from across Nazira Prime gathered to witness the execution of the human who had dared to corrupt their princess. Vendors sold commemorative items while betting pools opened on how long the condemned would last under various methods of execution. The mood was festive, with many treating the event as entertainment rather than justice. Princess Alex sat in the royal box, flanked by guards who had orders to ensure she watched every moment of the proceedings. Her father had dressed her in formal ceremonial robes that emphasized her status while restraining her movement. The crown of office felt like a weight of lead upon her silver hair. Emperor Valdris rose to address the crowd, his amplified voice carrying to every corner of the massive arena. "Citizens of the Empire, today we witness the fate of those who would threaten our sacred bloodlines. Let this human's death serve as a reminder that some boundaries must never be crossed." The crowd roared its approval, but Alex heard none of it. Her emerald eyes were fixed on the arena floor where Roy would soon appear. Her heart ached with the knowledge that she was powerless to save him. The guards surrounding her made any rescue attempt impossible, and her father's presence ensured she could not even call out a final goodbye. The escape artist in his cell beneath the arena. Roy felt the moment approaching when he would either live free or die trying. The energy shackles hummed with power, designed to contain beings far stronger than any human. But as he focused on his love for Alex, on his determination to protect her and free his people, he felt that strange strength. Rising within him once again, the metal groaned as he pulled against his bonds. Energy sparked and crackled around his wrists as the containment field began to overload. With a sound like breaking thunder, the shackles shattered, leaving him free for the first time in months. Jorik stared in amazement. "How is that possible?" "Don't know," Roy admitted, rubbing circulation back into his hands. "But I'm learning not to question it." He reached through the energy barrier that separated their cells, his enhanced strength allowing him to overload that system as well. Alarms began to sound throughout the compound as security sensors detected the breach, but Roy was already moving toward the corridor beyond. "Get to the others," he told Jorik. "Tell them it's time." Revolution unleashed. The uprising began with the systematic destruction of the compound's communication systems. Human slaves who had been dismissed as simple laborers revealed technical knowledge that their captors had never suspected. Xena's carefully placed explosives severed the primary data links, while former soldiers led coordinated strikes against guard posts. Roy moved through the facility like an unstoppable force, its impossible strength allowing him to tear through security barriers that had contained humans for decades. Each cell he opened released another fighter ready to die for freedom, and their numbers grew with each passing minute. The Nexari guards, accustomed to dealing with broken slaves, found themselves facing warriors who fought with desperate courage. Improvised weapons appeared from hidden caches while former engineers turned maintenance equipment into instruments of war. The compound that had seemed so secure moments before was rapidly becoming a battlefield. Commander Kress rallied his forces in the central courtyard, shouting orders as chaos erupted around him. Contain the breaches. Protect the arena access points. The Emperor must not be threatened. But even as he spoke, explosions rocked the foundations of the great arena above. Xena's team had found the structural supports that held up the massive amphitheater. They were systematically weakening them. If the arena fell, it would take the royal box with it. Love sacrificed Princess Alex. Felt the tremors running through the arena's superstructure and understood immediately what was happening. Roy had not only escaped but had inspired a full rebellion. Among the human slaves, her heart soared with pride, even as terror gripped her at the thought of what her father would do in response. Emperor Daldris was already shouting commands to his personal guard, ordering them to activate the arena's orbital defense systems. If he could not contain the rebellion through conventional means, he would destroy the entire facility from space, regardless of civilian casualties. "Father, no!" Alex cried, breaking free from her ceremonial restraints with strength born of desperation. "There are thousands of innocent people in this arena." "Then they will die as examples," Valdris snarled, his finger hovering over the activation control. "This corruption ends here, even if I must burn this world to cleanse it." Alex realized that her father's obsession with genetic purity had driven him beyond reason. He would rather rule over ashes than allow his authority to be challenged. In that moment, she made the choice that would define the rest of her life. Her upper arms grabbed the orbital control, while her lower arms struck pressure points that temporarily paralyzed her father's massive form. The technique was something she had learned from ancient martial texts, never imagining she would use it against her own parent. "I'm sorry, father," she whispered as the Emperor collapsed, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal. "But some things are more important than empire." The final standroid burst into the arena proper, just as the royal box began to collapse from structural damage. His enhanced vision picked out Alex's silver hair among the chaos, and he saw her leap from the crumbling platform with athletic grace. His powerful legs carried him across the arena floor in bounds that covered impossible distances. Reaching her landing point just as she touched down, their reunion was brief but electric. A moment of perfect connection amid the destruction surrounding them. Alex's forearms encircled him, while his strength provided the anchor she needed in a world gone mad. "The orbital systems," she gasped, pointing toward the palace's communication spire. Father was going to destroy everything rather than lose control. Someone has to stop the automated sequence. Roy followed her gaze to the crystalline tower that rose above the chaos like a needle pointing toward the stars. Getting there would require crossing a battlefield where Nexari forces were rallying for a final counterattack against the human rebels. "Together?" he asked, offering her his hand. "Always," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his. The new dawn. What followed was a running battle through the streets of the capital city as Roy and Alex fought their way toward the communications spire. Behind them, the human rebellion had spread beyond the gladiator compound as word of their uprising inspired slaves throughout the city to throw off their chains. Xena's tactical brilliance combined with Roy's impossible strength created a force that the Nexari military struggled to contain. Former engineers sabotaged critical infrastructure, while ex-soldiers led strikes against key targets. Most importantly, they fought not as slaves seeking revenge, but as beings demanding recognition of their fundamental worth. The communication spire's defenses fell before Roy's assault like paper before a hurricane. Ancient Nexari technology, designed to resist conventional attacks, crumbled under forces that its creators had never imagined possible. With seconds to spare, Alex's knowledge of Imperial systems allowed them to abort the orbital strike that would have destroyed half the planet. As the twin suns set over Nexera Prime, a new flag flew from the palace's highest tower. It bore no royal crest or imperial symbols, but instead showed two hands clasped in unity, one human and one Nexari. The Age of Empire was ending, replaced by something that had seemed impossible just days before, a partnership built on love rather than conquest. Epilogue. The wedding of World 6, months later. The ceremony that united Roy and Alex took place not in a palace, throne room, but in the same arena where they had first defied the impossible. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered to witness the wedding that symbolized a new era, cooperation between species. Roy wore simple clothes that emphasized his humanity, while Alex chose traditional Nexari robes modified to reflect her new role as an elected leader rather than a hereditary ruler. Their vows were spoken in both languages, promising not only personal devotion, but a commitment to building a galaxy where love knew no boundaries. The gladiator pits had been converted into gardens where former slaves worked alongside their former captors, growing food for the refugees still arriving from across the empire. Commander Crest, his loyalty transferred from emperor to principal, oversaw security with former rebels like Xena serving as his advisors. Emperor Valdris remained in comfortable confinement. His megalomania, treated as the mental illness it had, always been rather than divine right. He spent his days writing memoirs that no one would read, while his daughter and her human husband built the foundation for a civilization that valued character over genetics. As Roy and Alex exchanged their final kiss as unmarried beings, the crowd erupted in celebration that transcended species lines. Children who had been born into slavery played with former royal guards' offspring, their laughter proof that the future belonged to those brave enough to choose love over fear. The human who had been dismissed as just another slave had indeed snapped more than a beast's neck. He had broken the chains that bound an entire galaxy, proving that the greatest strength was not in muscles or technology, but in the courage to love without limits. In the end, Roy and Alex's love story became the foundation myth of a new civilization, one that would spread across the stars carrying a simple but revolutionary message. That worth was not determined by birth, but by the content of one's character, and that love truly could conquer all their children would inherit. Not an empire built on conquest, but a federation founded on cooperation, where the strength that Roy had discovered within himself lived on in the hearts of all who chose hope. Over hatred, unity, over division, and love over everything else that sought to tear the galaxy apart. The end.